everybody, and welcome back to Sell More Academy, the mastermind for more sales. My name is Ben McGarry, and for the last 2 decades, I've spent nearly every day trying to figure out how to sell more stuff. I've been in the trenches selling my own products and services for years. I've built teams, companies, and systems that sell from Main Street, small town USA, all the way to Wall Street. And I've been fortunate enough to coach and consult for countless others worldwide, all in totaling over $150 million in sales. During that time, it has become painfully obvious that the marketplace is and always will be loud and noisy. Content creators and social media gurus are incentivized to promote clickbait tactics and short-sighted strategies that often cause more harm than good. With the advancement in technology, it feels like everyone has all the tools at their fingertips these days, but nobody really knows how to put it all together. Plus, what worked yesterday might not work today and will almost certainly be different again by tomorrow. And that's precisely why I started Sell More Academy, to give a community and a set of resources to help you stay ahead of the curve, to help cut through the noise and make sense of the next best step. At Sell More Academy, we focus on what we consider to be the 5 pillars of modern business success: AI, branding, marketing, sales, and systems. And we bring this to you through a powerful combination of a vibrant mastermind community where you can connect with and learn from fellow high achievers and experts in the field, live masterclasses just like this one, where we dive into the strategies and tactics for each pillar, covering one per day, a curated collection of resources, including free tools that we're building to help you sell more effectively, and access to our Sell More directory that connects you with the providers and solutions that you'll need when it's time to either outsource or just find the right tool for the job. Our goal here is to provide you with everything that you need to not only stay informed and competitive, but to help sell a lot more stuff. And that brings us to today's masterclass, where we're diving into marketing, but specifically, we're going to cover avoidable website mistakes. Before we jump in, let's take a look at some hard numbers here. The average website conversion rate across all industries sits right around 3 to 4%. Technically, it's 2.9 to 3.6%. That means that for every 100 people who land on your site, at best, 96 of them leave without doing a single thing. No phone call, no form fill, just gone. Why is that? Usually, it's because of friction. Most business owners think that their website needs a massive, expensive redesign. They think it's a design problem, but it's usually not. It's almost always a structural problem, a clarity problem. We're all terrified of making the wrong move with our marketing. The fear of making a mistake is exactly why so many websites stay stagnant. And that's exactly why conversion rate optimization agencies, or CRO agencies, charge what they do. A mid-tier CRO agency charges anywhere from $6,000 to $15,000 a month. And top-tier agencies, they usually start at $10K and can easily push past $30,000 a month. They charge that much to come in and fix the exact things that we're going to talk about today. But here's the secret. If you know exactly what not to do, moving forward becomes incredibly simple. When you strip away all the common errors, the confusing copy, the hidden signals, the weak calls to action, what you're left with is a clear path to revenue. So today, we are not going to talk about color palettes or some kind of fancy animations. We're going to talk about the exact revenue-killing mistakes that are quietly costing you more customers. We're going to cover the exact fixes those $15,000 to $30,000 a month agencies charge. And more importantly, we're going to show you how to fix them today. So let's get into it and take a look at our avoidable website mistakes. So we're here to talk about something super critical, and that's the website. Your website is the centralized hub for your online presence. And specifically, we're going to go over, like we said, the mistakes that are actively costing you money. So we tend to hire consultants or agencies to come in and poke holes and tell us where we're costing ourselves. We're going to go in depth into your website. These are not just like minor annoyances that a marketer would get upset at. We're talking about revenue killers. But the good news is every single thing that we're going to cover is completely avoidable. Every issue that you have with your site, you could fix or your team could fix, and it could happen fairly quickly. So we'll identify the different pitfalls, then we'll give you the exact fixes to implement. And understand, please, as we go along, that this is not about redesigning your entire site. It seems like that is the constant urge, is to just strip it down and start from scratch. And that'll cost you a lot more. You have good information, you have good content on your site. It just needs structure and clarity. And so this is about making small strategic tweaks that deliver real results on the bottom line. And the bottom line is your conversion. And so let's get that website working for you instead of against you. All right. Well, first thing we have to understand is that your website is always on. So even if your business doesn't operate 24/7, your website is a 24/7 sales engine. And that happens whether you realize it or not. It's either generating leads and building credibility, or it's confusing your visitors and sending them straight off to your competitors. So just think about that for a second. Every moment, your site is doing one of those things. Most businesses don't even realize that their website could possibly be chasing customers away. But really, it's a silent killer of sales. And that's why the CRO agencies charge what they do. So let's pull back the curtain on a few of these issues and really focus on how can we ensure that our site is generating leads instead of losing them, that it is building credibility instead of creating confusion, and that it's actually converting the people that land on the page instead of just sending them off to your competitor. This all starts with a fundamental principle, and that is clarity. And so Donald Miller probably said it best: if you confuse, you lose. Donald Miller has written Story Brand. He's created Marketing Made Simple, Business Made Simple, an entire line. He's a wonderful author and entrepreneur, and clarity is his brand. And so if you need further reading on this, I definitely recommend diving into anything that Donald Miller puts out. But your website, the visitors on there make a decision in 5 seconds or less. That's it, 5 seconds. That's all you have to grab their attention and communicate your value. And really, considering the social media world we're in, 5 seconds is a long time. Most people's attention span is now down to 3. So 5 seconds actually gives us a bit of a benefit, but we need to make sure that we use that properly. Clarity comes in because clarity will always beat cleverness. If there's nothing else that you remember from today, please remember that. Clarity beats cleverness every single time. When your message is clear, people understand it. They engage. But when it's confusing, they leave. And that confusion is costing you conversions. It's costing you leads. It's costing you revenue. And don't forget, you probably paid to get them to your site. So if they don't convert, you also lost your ad spend, your lead spend, right? And if it's not directly going to a platform, maybe it's going to an individual that you have on your team that does outreach, or a cold outreach system, or whatever. There are costs involved with getting people to land on your page. And if you're bouncing them off, that cost needs to be factored in. So this could be a much bigger problem than maybe you realized before the class started. So how do we actually achieve this clarity where people are not confused? Well, let's look at the first common mistake that ends up sabotaging it. And so as we go through this, we're going to hit on all of these mistakes. And so that we're looking at the inverse. So if we just by default don't make these mistakes, we will by default convert more customers, right? So the very first big mistake is using insider language. That's because your customers don't speak your company jargon. I just had somebody reach out to me recently through LinkedIn, and the first thing that they said to me was, "Hey, you're a decision maker." What? That is sales lingo. That is something that only gets talked about in prospecting circles, in sales circles, in closing conversations. We're not talking about decision makers. We don't call people decision makers. That's not a title that people wear. The person was shocked when I brought it up to him. Nobody's ever told me that I shouldn't say that. But what sense does it make to go out and speak your language to customers? Oftentimes, we only do that to try to make ourselves feel better and more important, but they just don't care about your acronyms or your technical terms. Look at the medical industry. Most of us can't even understand what the average, medical professional is saying because they use so many abbreviations, they use their own jargon, and it's just not common for us to be able to really understand that. And so the same thing happens with your company, whether you believe that or not in this moment. The thing that is super simple and super clear for your business and your industry before you got into that business, before you got into that industry, you didn't even know it existed. And that's the state that your prospects and your customers are in now. So they don't care about your acronyms. They don't care about the technical terms. They care about them. So we don't want to create any kind of barriers, which is essentially what the jargon will do. If I start talking about the inner workings of quantum mechanics right now, some people are going to immediately tune out because that terminology doesn't make sense. We don't have any reference points to it. And so the same thing is going to happen with your business. So you might think that you sound smart, but you're really just confusing people. And when people are confused, they're not going to convert. So the fix here is super simple. We want to translate everything. So speak the language of your customers' problems. And the only way you're going to know this is by doing research. So that can be from feedback, direct feedback that people have told you. It can be feedback from your systems. Maybe you run surveys or something of the sort. It can be from looking at industry journals and forums and just gathering feedback. And it can be reviews from other products and services. So all of that is going to help you understand the language that your customer speaks in, particularly about the problems that you're trying to solve. You want to talk about the solutions that they are actively searching for. So, for instance, you're not going to say something like leverage synergistic solutions. If people are talking about synergy, if they're talking like that, that means nothing, right? They're trying to sound intelligent instead of sound super clear. This is a really, really hard problem for people to solve the more technical their business is. Say, instead of saying leverage synergistic solutions, just say get more customers. That's what they care about. That's why they came to your page. It's direct, it's clear, and it leads us directly into our next mistake. The next mistake is that we put too much on the page. We put too many words, particularly in the header or the hero section. Those are two separate things, but we'll just kind of lump them here. So in the top, in the first fold, when we land on that page, regardless of what screen we're on, there's just too much there. If there's too much going on, chances are they're not going to read it all. And that's because visitors are scanning your website. There are multiple tools that show us this and have kind of confirmed this for years now. There are multiple ways that you can verify this for yourself. But understand that people, particularly today, are not reading, and they're definitely not reading in detail. At best, they're skimming or scanning your site. And so your header, your hero section, those are your two pieces of prime real estate. If it's cluttered, if it has too many words, well, then you're bearing the value proposition, and the value proposition is what will actually make somebody move forward. People are not going to take the time out of their busy universe to try to decipher what you're trying to say. If they can't grasp it quickly, they make up their mind and they're gone. And the worst thing is, it's hard to get them to come back. I mean, the best thing you could say is, hey, remember when we were confusing? We're not confusing anymore. But even that, they're going to bring a skeptical eye into it. And so that first impression of too much going on is a big problem. It could hurt you for, down the road. So the fix here is a pretty critical one, really. One clear message is always more powerful than 5 competing ones. Keep your main headline, if possible, try to keep it under like 8 words. If you need 10, that's one thing. But if it's taken up 20, that's too much. That's too much detail. Go through it and cut stuff out. Einstein was quoted as saying, probably misquoted as saying, something along the lines of perfection is not when there's nothing left to add. Perfection is when there's nothing left to take away. And that is the principle that CRO agencies operate from. They're not there to go add more words and make it sound better in by adding filler or fluff or jargon. They're there to remove all of that stuff and cut down to just the core message in the language of the customer. And so these two go hand in hand together, making sure that we're not using jargon and that we're not adding too many words into the header. Plan, prepare, make it easy for somebody to scan or skim your site instead of having to read every word. This clarity, once you get it down, will absolutely help you to avoid the next common pitfall. And we just talked about keeping your headlines tight, but let's hit another common mistake. Weak call to action language. Generic CTAs like click here or learn more are conversion killers. And if you're trying to lead them into a conversation like booking a call or submitting a form, you're going to see those conversion numbers drop. They don't exactly tell your visitor anything about the benefit they'll get. They'll learn more. Learning sounds like work, right? Clicking sounds like work. Why am I clicking here? What am I learning more? What am I submitting? What to what end? Why am I doing that? And so we want to be sure that we're using active, strong call to action language. And so instead of saying, hey, click here, we're going to use benefit driven language. And so we're going to say, get your free guide or start my free trial or see how it works or book my strategy call. All of those are active and they're taking the next step. And this is such a critical part because there's studies to back it up. As you can see, studies show that benefit-driven CTA, so they get something by taking this action, perform 202% better than generic ones. So if you want to convert more people that land on your page, this is one of the easiest fixes you can make. All you have to do is focus on them. What is it that they get by taking this action? What is their benefit? And list that instead. Now, there are times where click here makes sense. There are times where learn more makes sense, but it's very few and far between. Most of the time, probably 95% or better, you want to use active, strong language for your call to actions. So make this change. And I can almost guarantee this one change enough will change massively your conversion rate on your site. But when combined with all of them, well, things are going to go much better. So let's talk about, now that we have strong, active call to action language, where do we put these call to actions throughout the page? Well, mistake number 4 is when people are not repeating them down the page. So you've worked hard to build a compelling case, to show value, and then you expect your customer to scroll all the way back up to the top of the page or all the way down to the buy now button? That's just lazy on your part. And people don't want to hunt. That's not what they came here to do. They came here to buy or to sign up or to connect with you. They did not come here to hunt through your sales page or your website, and they won't. So you have to pepper those CTAs throughout your page, only where it makes sense. You don't want to overdo it, of course. Typically, we want to place them strategically after we've presented a key benefit or we've overcome an objection. And so if we're talking about a common market problem, the next thing may make sense to do a call to action. If it's maybe right below an FAQ, well, we've cleared up a lot of objections, maybe right beneath the FAQ is the spot that says get started and create my account now or whatever the case may be. And so we want to be very strategic about where we place them. And as a general rule of thumb, we don't want to go more than 2 to 3 folds without having a call to action there. And so a fold, if you're unfamiliar, is just the loading screen on whatever screen you're on. So on a desktop, it's what takes up, as soon as your website loads, what takes up the full screen. That's your first fold. The second fold would be your first scroll down, the third scroll down, and so on. And so usually those are broken up into separate sections, and we don't want to go more than 2 to 3 without having a call to action there. But again, the priority is placing them somewhere strategic, not just making sure that we have them ever so often. When we do this, we can start to guide them kind of through the path based on where they left off. And that's an important piece. Somebody may actually just look at your header and then your hero, the first part of your first fold. And if you have good call to action there, they may just move on. Somebody who maybe needs a little more convincing might read halfway through the page. And so that's where I would need a button to move on. Or maybe they're really skeptical and they read the entire bit. Well, you better have one down at the bottom so that they can move forward. So you're kind of planning for each type of visitor that you're going to get, not just the page itself, right? We're going to focus on being customer centric here, not on site centric by any means. And so we want to just make sure that we guide them at every stage of their journey. Okay, so there is another wonderful resource if you really want to get this dialed in with your CTAs. It's a book called Don't Make Me Think. And there's a new version out. It's like Web 2.0. But essentially, it's a bunch of studies done over what makes people click and what makes people bounce. And so if you really want to dive into the weeds and learn more, that's where you could find it. I'm telling you, this is the core lesson from there, but feel free to dive in because ultimately that is what we want from our clients. We don't want them to think about the process. We want this to be so automatic and so aligned with them and where they are that they move forward without even needing to think about it. As you're going through and selecting where you put your call to action, do not forget about overloading. We do not want to overload them. At most, you want to have 1 to 2 call to actions in place. And since we talked about Donald Miller, his methodology I believe in wholeheartedly. And so with his, you will have a primary call to action. That's the main thing that you want them to do. That's the make a purchase, book a call, whatever the case may be. And then you have a secondary or a transitionary call to action. And that is there as a step in between. So if buy now is the primary action that I want them to do, getting more information or downloading our brochure may be a transitionary step before that would make sense, right? It would be a logical progression. And so using those transitionary call to actions or secondary call to actions intelligently is really the key. Most of the time, when we look at sites, the current call to action should probably be the secondary call to action, and a better primary should be established. Now, that's not going to make sense for every single business type out there, but just evaluate for yourself. Are there 2 things? Could you maybe send them to a lead magnet or a tripwire offer instead of your largest offer? And if you're able to do so, you're going to be able to start measuring those clicks and you'll see kind of where your market is. Do they need more information on the homepage, or are they gathering enough after the click in order to take action? So let's talk about visuals. That's the next part. Mistake number 5 is when we put images up that do not relate. And the same thing goes for videos or icons or really anything that is going to grab our attention. Symbolism is incredibly, incredibly important to humans. It is our most advanced form of communication technology that we have. One symbol is if one picture is worth 1,000 words, then one symbol is worth millions of pictures. Because if we look at certain symbolism, we can determine a lot. And so every single thing that is on your page is going to be examined, whether consciously or subconsciously. It's usually our subconscious that's looking at symbols. And so we want to be sure that we are using images and symbols that relate to our message. If we use generic stock photos, they can easily become a distraction. A handshake photo really isn't saying anything that's unique about your service. If we use irrelevant visuals, it almost always breaks up the clarity. If it makes me stop and think, why did they use this? I'm not in the buying trance anymore. I do not have clarity anymore. I'm confused. And the confusion may cause me to bounce off. And if I bounce, then I'm never going to convert with you. And so oftentimes we put images, we put symbols on the page, and they take up space. They damage our credibility. They really don't add anything extra to it. But the fix here is maybe just as simple or even more simple than the rest. Use authentic imagery. Everybody in the world may do what you do, but nobody is you and nobody does it quite like you. So you could use your own images. You could use your own videos. You could use your own symbols there in order to make sure that you are adding meaning, that you're clarifying the process instead of confusing it. If you're able to do things like showing your customers in action or a review from your customers, that is no longer stuck in the sea of sameness with everyone that you compete with. Now you're able to stand out. Now you can have real people with real proof, and that builds credibility. That builds authority, and that allows people to move forward with you. So let's dive into the language part again, but we're going to look at it from a slightly different angle here. So mistake number 6 is using that clever language over clarity. And this is something that is really starting to rise more and more and more because so many people are turning over the copywriting, one of the most important parts of our business, to an AI machine. And AI is going to make us sound smart. And even when AI seems like or says that it's providing something clear, it's usually not. Now, it might make sense to you, but there's a lot of psychological biases going on there. It's a different conversation. But to others, have you ever noticed if you share your AI output, it doesn't quite make sense to someone else as clear as it made sense to you? Well, that's because they are not privy to all the context that you are. And so we need to be really careful about this. We are not trying to sound smart or clever. Smart and clever people go broke. Smart and clever people struggle. One of the maybe smartest and most clever people of all time was Nikola Tesla. And we only know him because of the business and professional failures that he had being taken advantage of by Edison and others. And so we want to make sure that we're not doing the same thing. We don't want to be the smartest person on the page here. We want them to feel smart. We want the reader to feel like they grasped everything, like, oh, this is so easy. I can't believe I didn't think of this myself. That is the objective, not, gosh, these guys are so great. I should pay them all my money and get whatever it is they offer. That's a huge mistake here. And so your customers are not looking for puzzles. They're looking for solutions. They have specific problems and they want a solution for it. Ambiguous, witty statements will make them bounce, particularly if you have somebody that's even a little bit skeptical or has a little bit of market sophistication. If they've seen a few of these ads, they're going to bounce as soon as they see things like, we help synergize your core competencies for optimal growth, we're a growth partner, that, all this stuff. It doesn't make any sense. And it makes, because everybody's using the same techniques and everybody's moving away from using intelligent, trained human copywriters to just spitting out whatever comes out and then calling it a day. Everybody's starting to sound more and more like jargon, and it's getting mixed together. And now nobody really knows what it means. We don't know what you stand for, what you do, or who you help. And so the fix is simple, just like the rest. Be direct, be simple, be clear, be immediately understandable. Clarity is your ultimate competitive advantage. I'm reminded here by a principle that has really kind of stuck with me through the years, called Occam's razor. And since we've already talked about Einstein, we'll talk about him again. His interpretation of Occam's razor is simply make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. Right? That's what we're trying to do here. We want to cut down to the core of how easy can we make our message to understand, and then stop. We don't need to tool around forever. We just need to get it to that level. And that's our goal. So be direct, be simple, be understandable, be clear. Make sure that we are not trying to be clever, and understand that especially in crowded markets, that clarity can be your biggest competitive advantage. There's an episode of Mad Men where they have a cigarette company come in, and Don Draper is pitching them. And they're talking about how competitive the market is and this and that. And he asks them about the process. He says, walk me through the process of making your cigarettes. And the first guy doesn't know, and the boss that's sitting there is immediately kind of embarrassed and upset about it. And he's like, "How shame on you. You should know what we do." And he very proudly starts walking through the process of creating their cigarettes, all the way from growing to drying and toasting and so on. And Don Draper stops him right there. He says, "Toasted. That's it." All the other company, and I'm sorry, the guy says, the company owner, the cigarette owner says, everybody toasts their cigarettes. Everybody toasts their tobacco. And Don Draper says, no, cigarettes are deadly. Everybody else's cigarettes kill people, but yours are toasted. Now, what does that mean? That means that even though everybody was doing the same thing, the one that called it out broke the norm, right? The one that said we're toasted changed the conversation away from "are cigarettes good for you" to, well, this cigarette is toasted and others aren't. And so, yes, there's a bit of spin, but it was clarity. It was saying, even though all cigarettes had it, it was saying, we do this, that made them stand out and then had massive success. This was a very real story that took place that was depicted in that show. And so understand that being clear, especially in those crowded markets, could be the thing that helps you stand out. If you clean carpets, well, maybe you're Stanley Steamer and you get carpets cleaner. Now, probably everybody could say that, but the fact that Stanley Steamer said it first means it's stuck in our minds. And so you can do that same thing with the copy on your page. Be super clear, so clear that there's no ambiguity. They know who you are, who you serve, and how you serve them. And then our call to action should handle the heavyweight thereafter. Okay, so speaking of losing, let's talk about what you're losing if you are following mistake number 7 and you do not have a lead magnet in place. We've already talked about making sure that we're clear. So now they're on our page. They're interested in something. Maybe they're not fully ready to move forward, but not having some kind of lead magnet, some kind of conversion mechanism, means that you're going to leave serious money on the table. The thing that's kind of hard for us to grasp sometimes is that most visitors, most people in our market, well, they're not ready to buy right away. or maybe they're just not ready to buy on their first visit. We have to drive by a lot of billboards before we even recognize one that sticks with us. We see the same commercials over and over before we decide to take action on them. And we've talked about the different touch points that are needed previously. If you are focused on that and focused on converting every single visitor into a lead, not necessarily into a customer, but into a lead, then a lead magnet is the way to go. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to offer them something valuable. Otherwise, they'll just leave and they may never come back. So the fix here is a free, I know this hurts a lot of people to give away something for free, but a free, valuable download or asset. It doesn't always have to be the things listed here, but some of the common ones that we would see would be a checklist, guides, a template, something that solves some kind of a mini problem, a course. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to build our email list so that we can reach out when we have new offers, we can nurture people, we can move them down the pipeline. And we want to keep the conversation going. So lead magnets allow us to attract and convert visitors into leads. And then they also help us to segment our leads, meaning I may have a customer list already and say it's going a bit stale. If I send out my lead magnet to them, although they're already leads for us, instead of saying, hey, I'm just circling back to see if you're in the market, if they take action, I know they're interested in that thing, in something that the lead magnet delivers. And so if I've been intelligent about making sure that my lead magnet actually goes along with my offer, maybe it's a step along the path to my offer, well, it makes this part much easier. And so think about things that one way I like to think about this is I think about who is my perfect customer. Okay. The perfect one, the one that you love, the one that promotes you, not just the person that sticks around and pays you longest, the one that promotes you, the one that's positive, the one that makes you feel good, the one you want to connect with. Not to say they never have any issues or hangups, but they're genuinely, generally in a good mood. They're a good customer, somebody that energizes you to be around or to work with. And a crucial point, they tell other people. I make that distinction because we have multiple customers sometimes that have been with us for a long time and we think of them as our best customers, but maybe they cause the most headaches or ask the most questions, or they don't actually send us any real business. So they're good customers, but maybe not our best. Okay. So when we think about our absolute best, all we need to do is start thinking backward. So before they were our perfect customer, they were just a perfect prospect. And to be a perfect prospect, there was a set of things, maybe 3, maybe 5 things that the criteria that they met, right? Maybe they're in the market now. They are a decision maker. Not that we're telling them that they're a decision maker, but we know ourselves, yep, they're a decision maker. They have the wherewithal. They can afford to do this. This is an actual painful problem that they want to solve, not a problem that they want to keep, as we've talked about in other master classes. And so we want to think about what are the things that make them a perfect prospect before they're a perfect customer. And then we want to turn our lead magnets into those things. And so that's how we take a suspect visitor and convert them into a prospect, is by using a lead magnet that allows us to segment them, to say, oh, this is relatively where they're located in their journey, in their buyer's journey. They should be right here because they just downloaded this. Give or take, maybe I'm not perfect, but I'm not lost. And that's what lead magnets allow us to do. Convert people and then segment people. And so this is all about solving one specific problem for them. People struggle with lead magnets a lot. So let me make it very clear. Every single lead magnet should solve one problem. You could have 1,000 lead magnets. Some places, particularly over the last like 5 or 10 years, have moved to this thing where they do like a lead magnet every week, a lead magnet every month. So it's constantly going to be rotating. The problem is when people try to make the lead magnet too big. So ebooks are bad lead magnets. Why? Because people aren't going to read the whole thing. The stats show that ebooks are barely read. So you'd be better off condensing that 20 pager down to a 2-page checklist and guide. That would be more beneficial. One thing that I like to think about when I'm doing lead magnets, and they could be software too. We have all of these tools. It could be a new software. It could be, it could be an audit, something along those lines, where it's going to show them the problems that maybe you end up solving. So marketing agencies do this a lot. They'll give an audit of your agents or of your marketing and then tell you how to do it. But if you want them to do it, well, great. That's what they do for people. And so you can just naturally move into working with them. And so that's kind of what we're looking for here. Again, we're going to build our email list. We're going to keep the conversation going and going in an intelligent way because we're segmenting. And then ultimately you need to understand that the opt-in rate for solid lead magnets usually runs somewhere between 10 to 30%. And really good ones sometimes can hit as high as 60%. And maybe there's some anecdotal stories of going higher, but that's what the research shows is top performers hit around 60% or greater. And so if you want to take your 2 to 3% conversions or 3 to 4% conversions that we talked about earlier and turn them into 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 even, well, lead magnets may be the tool that helps you get there. And so spend a lot of time on this. Don't just throw things out that are valuable. Make sure that there's real utility for the person that downloads it, gathers it, grabs it, whatever. And understand that that value is in exchange for their contact information. So they give you an email address and you give them something that they maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to get, that is unique to what you do and your process and whatever the case, but helps to make them the perfect prospect for you later. Okay, so next we're going to talk about a common design mistake that tends to frustrate a ton of visitors. So again, we're not focused on design and redesigning your page, but we do need to spot things that cause problems. And so we've already talked about the importance of having a lead magnet, but let's think about this. If your carousels on your page are moving too fast, particularly with like auto rotating sliders, it will kill your conversion because it moves too quickly. I can't digest it all, so it creates confusion. So I may not even make it to your lead magnet. By the way, just for a second, a lead magnet makes a fantastic secondary or transition call to action. That is a wonderful way to use that instead of always moving to call or contact us. Okay. So people sometimes won't even get there because the carousel is moving too much. We care too much about the image. And the funny thing is, I bring this up all the time, one of the most valuable sites of all time, still today, is Craigslist. And Craigslist might be one of the ugliest sites ever made, but it still is valuable. And so understand that when it comes to copy or design, copy is going to win. We need to be clear. And then as we add in design, it should complement the message that we're trying to make, not try to make its own message. This is not an art show unless you're selling art. This is not an art show on your website. This is about conversion. And so I would recommend avoiding the auto rotating carousels or putting them on a very slow time speed or timetable, at least 1.5 to 2 times as slow as you read. If you're a fast reader, maybe it's 3 times. Make sure that people have time to understand and grasp the entire thing before moving to the next. Otherwise, you're creating a bunch of loops in their mind that are going to create confusion. Carousels usually will signal to the visitor that you're trying to cram too many messages into one spot. So again, as a CRO company, usually the first thing that we're going to do is come in and chop that off and say, you do not need to have all of this here. You can take these 5 images and just spread them out through the page where they make sense. If you absolutely must use it, like I said, use either turn the speed way down or just add manual controls so they can shift between them. This is good for like reviews. This is good for logos, testimonials, things like that, showing who you've worked with in the past if you want them to only focus on one at a time. However, understand that by using a carousel by default, you do lose the mass of that. So let's say I could potentially have a review wall with 10, a section that's just reviews that has 10 different reviews all listed out where they can read them all at once. That in some ways will look much more impressive than this carousel where I can only see three at a time and it just keeps rotating. And so I think a lot of people do that because they don't have that many and they want to kind of hide how many are rotating. But if you have the ability to use a grid or to use single images instead of a carousel, I will always encourage that. And if you ever actually have us do CRO on your site, then that's one of the first things that we're going to bring up too. And so, um, like I said, add in manual controls if you have to have them. Add in a way to really, really slow it down. A well-designed, static, not moving hero section will almost always outperform a carousel. Now, I encourage you to go look at the stats on this because you're going to talk to a marketing agency and they're going to have a really pretty site and all that. That's because they're essentially a digital artist, right? And so they need to show off the pretty and blah, 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 blah. That doesn't mean you should do that unless that's your business. If you're in the service business and you have a big carousel running, it's killing your conversions. I guarantee it. And I would absolutely split test that like today if you could, because it's such an easy thing to switch. Okay, so if you have a well-designed static hero image, then you should expect to have higher conversion rates. So just measure those two out. And the reason why is because it will keep your message clear and focused. I'm not worried about all the things that are moving. I'm focused on the message. Okay, so let's move on to another mistake. That was number 8. Let's look at number 9. This is really one of the biggest issues for the copywriting side of things. And we've all heard that we need to tell our story and our brand story and this and that. But let's really focus on this as kind of a deeper issue. If and when we are talking about our product, our journey, our services, our support, our reviews, our awards, our materials, any of that, we're talking about us. We're talking about our story. Well, this is a pretty huge trap. And this is probably the roughest slide of it all because the truth is, the thing that you really have to sit with is that even your best customers don't care about you as much as you think they do. Even the ones that have been with you for years, even the ones that bought you dinner, even the ones that you talked to at a trade show, they don't care about you. They care about them. You and your service, product, whatever, are there to serve them. Now, I know this is hard from an egotistical standpoint for a lot of us to grasp, but it's just the truth. When they land on your site, they are not asking, what's unique about this company or what's unique about them? No, they're saying, what's in it for me? Maybe the most important question in business. What's in it for me? You need to position yourself as the guide instead of the hero. When this came to me, it was the most glass shattering moment ever. And this really changed the way that we approach all copywriting and marketing. And it's as simple as taking a look at any of the major companies that you like. Apple is a good example. If you look at the iPhone, iTunes, what was it, an iPod, iWatch, whatever commercials that they run, they are never about Apple, never about their newest technology, never about the growth of their company. It's never about their $1 trillion valuation or whatever they have. It's always about the end user, which makes sense because the end user cares about them. They want to know what's in it for me. So even the features that they talk about are all talked about in the context of being customer centric. There's one commercial that I remember really well where they spent God knows how much money researching, putting it all together, testing to make sure it worked before it went out. And I feel like it was about a 30-second commercial. And in the commercial, you had people on stage auctioning off information. And you see this young woman with a phone, and all the only message from Apple there was iPhone is privacy. And that was it. And they weren't talking about Apple and their great security features or anything like that. They were talking about your data. You, if you care about data and you don't want people auctioning it off, this commercial spoke to you. Now, I'm not an Apple user, so it didn't speak to me, but for all of the Apple users in the world, that type of messaging spoke to them. They did others where they had long battery life while a guy was riding around on his bike in his neighborhood. Essentially, what Apple has said really since the beginning, since their 1984 commercial, is that this is about you. You are the hero. We're here to be a guide along that path, a footnote in your story at best. That's it. And if you can humble yourself enough to do that with your copy, your site is going to convert way higher, way higher. Go look at the last few things that you purchased and then tell me if their site is customer centric or product centric. Most of them, particularly if they're newer businesses, are product centric. And particularly if they're chasing product market fit, they will always be product centric by default. That's why we don't focus on that here. Okay, so again, position yourself as a guide, be the old man, be the sage, be the one that has wisdom that guides the rambunctious hero through their journey. This happens in almost every story, every heroic story that's out there. There's a guide along the path, and that is who we should aspire to be to our audience. Okay, so if you're able to do this, you can, what the way it looks in reality is that you will have shifted away from talking about the things that you do and solve and all this and over to the customer's problems, their struggles, and their desired outcomes in their language. That's the important piece, in their language. And when we do this, that is going to make your site, instead of feeling corporate or salesy, it's going to immediately feel relevant and engaging, like it was written for me, right? Like, did this person know me? Is my phone listening to me again and made this website? That's what we're looking for here. So now let's move on to discuss how making things too complicated can actually drive people away. This is mistake number 10. So if we make the site too complicated, we're adding in more friction. If it's hard to push a button, if it's difficult to get in touch with you, if they have to go searching, uh, that just makes it harder. So if you're using complex navigation, if you use really dense text blocks instead of spreading things out, those are adding to the confusion. You can use layouts that are confusing as well. Like, oh, I'm going to redesign the layout. And that's fine. Just understand that your customers have been conditioned by thousands of other sites to look at it a certain way. So if you do something completely different, you have to start that education process over. And now, what are you educating them on? How to read your site or how to move forward with you? And so the simplicity here is, I mean, it cannot be understated how important this is. When your website makes your visitors think harder than necessary, they will leave. Your customers are not stupid, but they do not have time to sit there and learn everything that you need them to know in order to move forward based on the way that you wrote this. So focus on them instead. Focus on their problems, their struggles. Make sure that as you do that, you understand that they're busy. That is one of the biggest problems and struggles that they have. And so they do not have time to decipher your complicated site. So always make sure that we simplify everything. Try to keep your navigation to 4 or 5 items or fewer if you can. Use white space, the most white space you can use. Use it to generously break things up and make your content breathe, right? As you can see here, we're using white space on our presentation because if we put it all into one big clump, it would be hard to follow. You might get yourself lost. What if you can just stop and think about something along the way? It's hard to find your spot. So break it up. It makes it easy to skim and it makes it easy to digest as well. One other thing that is always important to me when I'm thinking about writing, particularly when I wear my copywriter hat, is I want to give. It's not about writing everything on one line or creating a everything is a one sentence paragraph. That's not really the thing. It's about flow. It's about melody and making sure that maybe it's two sentences here, one there, three there, and that's kind of how it goes because it's kind of how we talk, right? We talk in more spurts, and then maybe we have a quick interjection, and we talk in these, right? And so that's very normal for us. And so one of the things that I like to do is I like to make sure that I'm using white space as a place for rest. I don't think that we often think about that. We're not going to process just new information, new information, new information, new information, new information, go. The way that we're actually going to process is new information, think about it. New information, think about those. How does that relate to the first one? New information. Oh, now I'm intrigued. Oh, maybe I'll move forward now. There has to be pauses in there for us to actually think about it. And if you're in one long text block or you're not using space well, it's like you're not breathing, right? It's like you're at a speech and you don't want to miss anything. So you don't even take notes. You're just locked in the whole time, right? And so that's what we want to avoid. We want to give them a spot for their eyes and their mind to take a break. Put a bench in the middle of your park so people can sit down and then let them breathe on that before you hit the next piece. And so it's just as simple as adding extra space in where it makes sense. People will get turned off if you just copy the tactic without understanding the context. So I'm sure you guys have all seen it where every single paragraph is one sentence and it's just all spaced out. And it's just, and maybe the first time you saw it, you're like, this is nice. But now you're like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. It's because imagine a song like that. If everything was just one line, I guess that's what, some like older rap songs sound like, right? Or it's just a single line, punchline, punchline, punchline. Instead, we want a melody where there's two or three, there's one, there's three or four, there's a list, right? We want to break things up. Okay. So always prioritize user experience over cramming in too much information. And this will lead us to our next mistake where we focus on prioritizing the design over the copy. And this is huge because obviously you've heard me kind of, talk a little bit about it. This is something that matters a lot to me, but beautiful design doesn't sell things. It's pretty rare. There are tons and tons and tons and tons of things that have been sold with no design other than maybe thinking about the font that was used. Words sell things. A stunning website that has confusing copy will still lose to a plain website with clear, compelling messaging. Nobody is going to come to you just because you have a pretty site if they're confused by who you are, what you do, and who you serve. They're going to go to the one that's ugly, that's really, really clear. Like I said, Craigslist is still one of the more valuable websites in the world. Keep that in mind. And so this happens usually because we involve designers too soon. We focus on the finished product before we focus on what the product should actually be finished to look like. And so this is a trap. Aesthetics will kill you. Design should always support the copy, not the other way around. Think about how often you or someone else has designed a page and then came back in to fix the copy later. It's the wrong path. The fix here is to write your copy first. A good designer should know how to complement the copy and make it look great, how to highlight, how to bring out the best parts of the copy and really make it jump off the page. But any designer or anyone who starts with design first instead of copy, at best they could guess. At best, you're going to pay a CRO company at some point to come in and fix it because it will not convert the same way. People buy because of words. Words sell things. Design is a delivery mechanism for your message. It is the bun to a hamburger. It is the bun to a hot dog. It is not the actual substance itself. It enhances, but it does not replace. And so it is absolutely critical in my world, at least, to make sure that we start with the copy. Make sure that we view our websites first and foremost as words. And if we do that, and then we hand it off to the designer, then we can have something beautiful that we're proud of. But there is nothing that will make you more proud than a site that converts. It doesn't matter if it's ugly. You will smile and say, I get 1,000 leads a month, but it's ugly. That is way better than saying mine's beautiful and nobody comes to it. And so just understand that when we're obsessing over our site, we're usually obsessing over the wrong part of our site. Okay. So we've covered several common mistakes, including prioritizing your design over your words. But let's reframe how we think about the website entirely now. What I want you to do is I want you to stop seeing it as just a digital brochure. That's the old way. The new way is to think of your website as an active 24/7 sales funnel. And if you don't like the term funnel, fine. It is an active digital salesperson that is always working for you. That's incredible. So every page should have a specific and measurable purpose. If any page doesn't guide the visitor toward a conversion, it should not exist. So the pointless about us where there's no call to action, you're better just getting rid of that page, right? Because somebody's going to land on it and they're not going to know what to do. You hope they'll go back to home, but they won't. You have to have a button exactly where they need it. You need to have a sign there that says, this is your sign. And so when we do this, we are not just presenting information, we're walking them through a buying experience. It's like if we walked into a store and somebody met us at the door and said, what are you looking for? I'll take you there so that you don't get lost in all this other junk that we have. That's what we're trying to cultivate, a personalized experience for that person. So we need to understand really their journey before we even get started. I mean, you can't write the copy if you don't understand their journey. But that is how we reframe this. It's being customer centric, being obsessed with them and what they need to see and what they need to hear and what they need to believe to be true in order to move forward is exactly how you will reframe your website. Okay. There are a few actionable strategies that you can take forward with you to make this entire lesson come to fruition for you. So the first is the one-liner test. And this is, Donald Miller calls this something a little different, and it's funny. I'm not going to tell you because I encourage you to look it up. But essentially, what you want to do is you want to know whether or not you can explain what you do in one simple sentence. If not, you're losing customers. Your one-liner needs 3 key things: who your customer is, what problem you solve, and the outcome that you deliver. Notice I said outcome, not features, not even benefits, but the outcome that you deliver. This becomes your main website headline. If you can get those 3 things into your headline, well, then you are in a good spot. Then all you have to do is test it. Remember, we want to try to keep that under 8 words too, if possible. So then we're going to test it. If a stranger, if your parent, if your friend that has no idea what you do, with no context whatsoever, can't understand what you do in 5 seconds, you're not refined enough yet. You've got to get better at it. And so use your AI tools, use whatever, iterate as many times as it takes to be clear, not clever. And this clarity is crucial for everything else that you're going to build. So the next piece is to build credibility. Now, of course, you're going to say trust. We understand that trust is the language that you're going to use, but really, we're not worried about trust, worried about credibility. So we say trust is the currency of conversion, but what we really mean is credibility is, right? They need to believe in you and your results and the outcomes that you're going to deliver. So you must prove, you must show, not tell, that you can solve their problem by strategically placing social proof throughout the customer journey. Use testimonials, case studies, use authority logos. Those are symbols of authority. And use data and stats. Don't ask people to believe you. Don't ask them to trust you. Don't ask them to have faith in you. Just show them the truth. That's how you'll build real credibility. Because trust is just a currency. That's it. There's no meaning to it other than what we ascribe to it. Just like the dollar bill. If we stop believing in the dollar, it's worth nothing, right? And trust is the same way. It's worth nothing. And so we don't want to depend on that. We don't want to build our business or our website on trust. Just show, not tell. Just show them the truth. Show them the results. Show them the testimonials. Show them the outcomes that you've achieved for others. And then they'll move forward. Don't ask them to trust you. Just show them the truth. Okay, now let's talk about making sure that we capture those people, because now we've got some interested folks, right? We're taking these strategies, we're taking action on them. So now we got some people that are interested. Well, we want to ensure that we are capturing leads. So this strategy is really about making sure that your lead magnet is impossible to miss. So the first thing that we do is we create that high value, the highest value that you could possibly deliver, lowest friction that you can give, and you want to turn that into a lead magnet style offer, like a checklist or a guide or something along this sort there. Now, think about this. I always think about this in relation to what you're going to sell. If you sell courses and coaching, maybe a mini course is better because that gets them in the habit and determines whether or not they'll actually log into that. You just got to think about this. Don't just automatically put out a checklist if a checklist has nothing to do with the thing that you're going to offer them. So put some thought into this. This is going to be one of the first impressions that people have of your actual service. And so once you've created that, you want to make the capture process really, really simple. So ideally, only ask for name and email. But really, you may not even need the name. A lot of places don't even ask for that anymore. If you sign up for a newsletter or you sign up for a lead magnet, they just want your email. Because we all know that personalization is going to be used, which means personalization is worth less than it's ever been worth. And so this process is about making sure that we eliminate that friction. If you ask for more fields on a form, your conversion will drop. This has been studied thoroughly. We're not going to dive into it. Feel free to on your own. But the fewer fields that you have, the better. One of the best rules I've ever heard is that if you're not going to use that piece of data immediately, then don't ask for it. So for instance, if you ask for the full name and email, and then your email that you send out to them only says, "Hi, Ben," and you're not using their last name anywhere, then that last name was a piece of data they gave you for no reason. And that will eventually sink into their mind, even if it doesn't on the first message. Eventually that creeps in of like, I wonder what they're doing with my data. I wonder what's going on here. And so we want to be sure that we only capture what we're going to actively use. If we don't need it, don't get it. You can get that later. There's different parts of your process for that. Trying to capture everything up front is a mistake. And then finally, don't just collect emails. The objective is to actually nurture, that is some industry jargon, but follow up with them, continue to have touch points, move them along their process. And so the difference in nurture and follow up is essentially the outcome. Follow up is just checking in. It's annoying. Nobody likes that. But when we're nurturing, we're moving somebody along the path. And so that's the objective that you want to do, is not to move somebody from, they just downloaded my lead magnet to now do business with me, but to take them from step A to B to C, and eventually you'll get to Z. That's the objective. Now, the people who want to jump to Z will already do it, but we're designing a pathway for those who take a little longer. Okay. So when we do that, we're not focused on sales. We're not focused on, putting numbers on the board. We're focused on relationships, on building a list. And we're focused on the fact that we're going to need sales in a month as bad as we need them today. And if they go through their process naturally, they'll stick. If I force them today, they may not. And so it's really about having a long enough vision to understand what you're building here with this lead generation side of things. And ultimately, if you can keep these strategies, clarity, credibility, and lead generation, then really you have a super foundation for getting all of the traffic that you want and then converting it. And that's the ultimate key here. So we've covered some critical mistakes. We've covered some actionable fixes. Let's kind of bring it all together and wrap this up. First, we have clarity. If you confuse the visitor, you will lose. You want to be simple, direct, and focused on the customer. Second, credibility. Have you provided enough proof? Are you showing authentic visuals and verifiable data? Do you use symbols of credibility? Are you establishing your authority? And third, conversion. Are your calls to action clear? Are they active? Are they benefit driven? Are they easy to find? Do they work? You'd be surprised how many times we click on buttons and they don't work. If you can guide your customer's journey and then check all of these boxes off, your website will become a revenue engine. Your website should become one of, if not the best salesperson that you have on your team. If you're the best and that's you and you work on the site, then the site should be better than you. Everything that you know and have should go into that site. It should be easy for them to make a decision. If we're gatekeeping information or making them get on a call with us, we might be missing the boat. This is industry specific. If your industry requires a call, I understand that, but not all do. And many of us try to force that. Okay, so your objective is to master these three so that you have that revenue engine, so that you convert at a level that you've never converted, and so that you're never short of leads to become your next customers. These pillars are the core of our framework today: clarity, credibility, conversion. And this brings everything into the 5 principles that I want you to take with you. And this is how to create the story-driven sales website. So the first principle, the customer is the hero, not the brand. You are a guide, you are the sage, you are helping them along their journey and not taking credit for it. That's for them. Clarity beats cleverness. If you can pass the 5-second test, then you're set. That 5-second test is not just for you. It's for strangers. It's for people that know nothing about the context that you have. The third principle is to define that problem, show that you understand their pain. You want to use their language to do so. That's how we do it. The fourth principle is to provide a clear plan, remove all friction and all confusion. And the fifth principle is call them to action. Tell them exactly what to do next and why. If you do that, as I've already said, your website becomes your most valuable employee. This is not a thing where you train it once and then leave it. You will train it, and you will train it well forever. Every time you get feedback, it should lend to at least some kind of notes that you say, we're going to look into our site and see if there's a way to make this better. If you get questions and they're not on your FAQs, add them to your FAQs. Anything that is coming up that causes friction in your sales process, bring to the front, but do so through these principles that we've given you. If you're able to do that, well, you're going to generate revenue. You're going to generate revenue around the clock, on holidays, on weekends. You're going to do it all the time because you've made it easy to do business with you. And that's the thing that we don't do generally. We don't generally make it easy to do business with us, but this is going to change everything. So I hope that today has shown you kind of what to do with your site, what not to do with your site, and maybe some of the areas where you thought you were good and could use a little bit more work. You don't have to go spend thousands of dollars a month on a conversion rate optimization agency. You can, or you could just go implement these steps and see what happens. Please make sure that if you are making any of these changes, that you check first, measure first, look at your conversions now compared to later, because you don't want to go make changes and not know the outcome. We're not based on gut feelings here. We're talking about real stats. We want to know the numbers. And as we've said in other master classes, always measure what matters. That's the most important thing here. So, again, I hope this was beneficial. I hope that these small changes, that the avoidance of common mistakes helps you. I hope that it prevents you from ever needing to use another agency. I hope that this is a glass shattering moment that makes your website click into place and every single one of the floodgates opens up for you. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or just want to push back, go ahead and drop those in the comments below this video. Happy to have those conversations. If you want help, if you want to talk about your specific site or even show examples, bring that into the mastermind community. That's where we'll dive deep into what you have going on and help to tweak it to make sure that we get you on track. That's only for mastermind members. So if you're a mastermind member, please bring that conversation into our marketing channel where there will already be a topic started about today's masterclass. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I hope that this information helps you go out and sell more.